wonderful. I am very excited for today's video. We have a lot of books to talk about. 31 or 32 to be exact. So buckle your seatbelts, be ready. It's going to be a long video. We're doing my January and February wrap-up. I read 32 books in that time. I read 33 books in that time frame. And so I am going to tell you guys my ratings, how I felt about them. Did I love them? Did I hate them? So let's go ahead and get into this video. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with January, obviously. And I'm gonna give you guys my stats for the month before I go into the books. So in January, I read 11 books. So yes, in January, I read 11 books. So out of those 11, 4 of them were 5 stars. 4 of them were 4 stars. 2 of them were 3 stars. I had 0 2 stars and 1 1-star book. And with all of those books, that was a total of 3,295 pages read. So I started my reading in January in the middle of the month. So that's why the jump between January and February was so big. But yeah, that's the only reason. And let's go ahead and jump in. So the very first book that I read was Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. So I gave this book a 4-star. I did enjoy it. It was the first book that I read that kind of got me back into my reading, my love for reading. I started this, and then after that I couldn't put books down. And so this is about a daughter that goes missing, and her mother is trying to cope with the fact that she's lost her daughter. And after 10 years, and the case has gone cold, she's trying to move on with her life and basically just figure out how to pick up the pieces of her life after that. And she starts to get these new pieces of evidence about her daughter from this new relationship that she's in, where the man's daughter looks exactly like her daughter that disappeared 10 years ago. So she's just trying to figure that out, and it was a very good thriller. However, I did have some reservations about this book. So overall, I did enjoy this book. And if you guys see me looking down, it's because I have notes that I took about these books, so it'd be easier for me to let you guys know. I did overall enjoy it. However, I did find that the plot was kind of predictable at times. Like, I'm sitting there reading the book thinking, Linda, you are so stupid. Her name's not Linda, sorry. I just say Linda a lot, sorry. You're so stupid. Like, how are you not seeing the connection between these things? But yeah, I was kind of like sitting there like, just get it together, please. But overall, it was a good book. I did find that the main character was sometimes annoying in that fact that she couldn't seem to place the puzzle pieces together when the reader could. That was a little bit annoying. But I did enjoy the multiple perspectives in this book. I'm not going to explain the multiple perspectives because it would kind of be a spoiler, but I did enjoy it. However, the end of this book bothered me a bit because I felt like the twist was good, but it wasn't original. Like, it's not something that we haven't seen done before, and it tied it up a little bit too neatly. The ending, I like the thrillers to be a little bit more open-ended and more up to interpretation, I guess, but I just felt like it was just tied into a neat little bow, and it was just a little bit too neat for me. But other than that, I did really enjoy the book. The second book that I read in January was House of Imperial. So this is kind of hard to explain because this book is a sequel, but I loved this series so much. I read the 3 books, the rest of the 3 books in this series in January, and I gave this book a 5-star. I really enjoyed it. It's by Jasmine Eve, I believe her name is, and I really enjoyed this series. I'm going to give you a brief explanation of the first book, which I did not read this year, but it's basically about this girl who gets tied up in an alien life, and there's a rock, stone that is really important to this alien world, also to the Earth world. The alien and the Earth world made a treaty years ago that they would give them this stone that would help them kind of even out the natural disasters that were happening on Earth. But this stone was also a tether of energy for the alien world. So they created this treaty. However, one of the kings of part of this world decided that he was going to try and find the stone and destroy the treaty for himself. And the Secret Keepers are these girls that didn't know that they are connected to this stone until he decides that he's going to steal it, and they find that they're connected, and each story follows a different girl, a different Secret Keeper, as well as the different houses that are in this alien world. I know that's a very weird description. It's kind of hard to explain it without giving away everything. It's a very, very good series. I liked it very much. It is a YA, kind of-ish, kind of YA series, paranormal series. It is so good. Take my word, read the first book, let me know what you think about it, but I'm just going to give you my thoughts. I did really love this book. I just realized that I didn't write down any notes for this book because it was the second and third, so I'm just going to move on, but I did really, really enjoy those books. The third book that I read in January was 5 Feet Apart by Rachel Lippincott. I talked about this in my book haul. I adored this book. I gave this book a 5 stars. It was so incredible. I will definitely be reading this sometime soon. Maybe not this month, but soon. And this is about a girl who has cystic fibrosis and a boy that has cystic fibrosis, and they meet in the hospital at one of their stays, and they fall in love. It is incredible. I loved it so much. My notes on this book, I just barely wrote any because the love that I have for this book, I don't think I can explain it into words. It was just so freaking fantastic. I really love the idea in this book that just like loving somebody that you can't have, because with CF patients, they're not allowed to be in a relationship because they can't get closer than 6 feet. And so this book destroyed me and put me back together again. It was wonderful. The ending of this book, I loved it, and I would definitely recommend this to anybody that wants to read it. I love this book so much. The next 2 books that I read in January were House of Light and House of Royal by Jasmine Eve, part of the Secret Keeper series, and I'm not going to talk too much about those, but the House of Light I gave a 4 star, and House of Royal I gave a 5 star. Enjoyed the series very much, and I would definitely want to have physical copies so that I can reread them sometime soon. And then the next 3 books that I read in January were the To All the Boys I Love series, and I have very conflicting feelings about this series because I love it for the fact that it is so cute and so wonderful, but I did have some things that I didn't like about the second and third book. So let me talk about that really quick. So the first book I really enjoyed. I gave this a 5 star. I enjoyed it so much. I love the fact that this has a diverse character as the point of view in this book. I think that that's awesome. It's a cute YA contemporary romance. There's not much for me not to love about this book. I really enjoyed it. I loved the fake dating trope. I loved the baking in this book. I really just love this book all around, and I think it deserves the 5 star that I gave it. P.S. I Still Love You, I gave a 4 star. I did really enjoy this book, but just not as much as the first. The reason that I fell in love with this book so much was the relationship between Laura Jean and Peter Kavinsky, and I felt like this book kind of stepped away from that a little bit. And as a reader, that's what I was looking forward to in this book, the relationship between the two of them. And as much as I loved the love triangle in this book, I just wish that I had more of that first core relationship and less of the side characters. However, the one thing I really did like about this book was understanding the loss of friendship and what that does to you as a person, and I really, really enjoyed that they included that in this book. And then lastly, Always and Forever Laura Jean. I gave this a 3 star. I did not enjoy this book as much as the first 2. I felt like the second book expanded on the relationship now that Peter and Laura Jean, I don't want to spoil it, but I feel like I don't know how. Anyways, I just felt like it expanded on this book. The second book expanded on the first book in a way that I felt was okay. The third book I just felt was just so unnecessary. I didn't think that it was a necessary part of this book. I know people think the third book is their favorite, and I'm not on that train. I didn't like it as much. I felt like the story had already been done in the first and second books, and I was just kind of bored through most of this. I did enjoy it. I would still reread it as a part of the trilogy, but it just wasn't my favorite. Okay, so the next book that I read in January was The Likely Resolutions of Oliver Clock, and this was by Jane Riley. I DNF'd this book. It was bad. It was so bad. I gave it a 1 star. I know this is like unpopular opinion. Some people rate their DNF, some people don't. I do. If I DNF it, I give it a 1 star because it just was not good enough for me to continue. But this book was so incredibly boring. I read halfway through this book, and halfway through the book, I still had not learned anything more than what they told me in the synopsis. And I was just so incredibly bored. I didn't care about the character. I didn't care about the side characters. I didn't care about the story. I just had no emotional invested interest in the story, and I couldn't make myself continue. I wanted to like it. I didn't even tell you what this book is about. It's basically about this guy who works at a mortuary, and he's been in love with this girl who does the flower centerpieces for burials, for funerals, and he's been in love with her forever. And then he finds out that through this letter, which I didn't even get to in the book because I was so bored, that she loved him this whole time, and he's just trying to deal with that because now she ended up getting sick and dying, and she's no longer there. And so he was just, I know that sounded like a horrible interpretation of that book just because I just did not like it. I'm sorry. I'm gonna move on. The next book that I read is In His Heart, and this is by Shelley Alexander. This was an adult romance book. It was a simple romance book. I gave it a 3-star. It wasn't anything incredible. It wasn't the best book I've ever read, but it was good. It was enjoyable. It was a good read at the time. Like most romance books, I found the plot to be a little bit predictable, but nothing that, made me want to be like, okay, I can't read this anymore, but yeah, it was just a little bit predictable. However, I really did enjoy the multiple perspectives in this book. I thought that it was a nice touch to the book that I really enjoy. I really enjoy reading books from multiple perspectives, and when I get that opportunity, I enjoy it. The twist at the end of this book wasn't overall original, but I still liked it. I just think overall it wasn't a bad book, but it just wasn't a fantastic book. And the last book that I read in January was The Upside of Falling Down by Rebecca Crane. This is actually a reread for me. I read it physically, well, not physically, I read it ebook version last year, and then I had the opportunity to listen to it via audiobook this year, and I enjoyed it just as much the first time as the second time. I gave it a 4-star. I really liked this book. It's a book about a girl who gets on a plane, and the plane crashes. She's the only survivor, and she has amnesia. She doesn't remember her life, anything about who she was, and when her dad comes to pick her up, she flees. She talks this one guy at the hospital and asks him to take her to wherever he is. She just wants a couple of weeks to figure out her life with this made-up story that she, isn't her real life because she doesn't know who she is. So she made up this name and this story, and she went along with it, and they fall in love, and it was a very, very good story. All in all, I really, really enjoyed it. Tropes about people having amnesia is probably one of my favorite tropes to read. I just think it's so interesting and so compelling, and I just really enjoyed that aspect of this book. And the first time I read this book, the twist at the end of this book, it got me. It got me hard. I was mad. Like, I wanted to throw my book across the room. I was mad. But after reading it a second time, I really just, appreciated the book for what it was. It was great. I really enjoyed it. I do recommend it. It's a very good book if you want to read it. All right, we are finally moving into February. So the very first book that I read in February was The Cruel Prince. Technically, I read this on the last day of January, and I happened to finish it on Goodreads at 12:15, but February 1st. And I gave this book a 4-star. People were raving about this book so much, and I originally gave it a 5-star. I think I was just so caught up in the hype of this book that I was like, it needs to be a 5-star, just like everyone else thinks it's a 5-star. But after sitting down to write the notes that I put down for this book, I realized that it was not a 5-star for me. This was a 4-star read. I did enjoy it, but it wasn't 5-star material. I'm excited for the sequel of this book, very much so. It just was not 5-star for me. So this is about a girl who her and her sisters get kidnapped from the human world and taken to the Fae world, where they are raised by Fae, and they are looked down upon because they are human, and it's just them trying to figure out the dynamic of this world that they are lesser in. And there's a lot of politics in this book, royalty in this book, a hate-to-love romance in this book, and I think it was good. I think the ending made me really want to continue with this book. It kind of redeemed itself for me, and I really enjoyed it, but it was not as good as I think I wanted it to be. I think I fell so deep into the hype of this book that I just wanted it to be exceptional, and it just wasn't that for me, but I am excited to continue. The first 50 pages of this book were quite boring for me. I considered DNFing it, but I figured that I would push through. It was the first fantasy book that I had read in a long time, so I think that just had a lot to do with it. I just wasn't wrapping my head around the world building, but after the first 50 pages, I really started to enjoy the book. The one thing I did not like about this book, though, there was a romance in this book that I just did not feel like it was necessary. I felt like Holly Black could have written in the information that she got from this romance completely differently and made it even more exciting, and that romance just wasn't necessary. I think that's the only thing about this book that really upset me, is I just didn't feel like that romance was necessary at all. I like the fact that Jude is a strong, badass female character, but she also has flaws and insecurities that she's able to recognize, and I really like that. I think that sometimes in books with strong female characters, they're painted as indestructible and perfect and devoid of feeling, and I really like that this character, I felt was fleshed out enough to accept the fact that she had insecurities and flaws in spite of being a badass character. And the last thing that I really, really enjoyed about this book is I love that the romance in this book was not the entirety of this book. As much as I'm a romance fiend, I will live and die for romance, I liked that. I liked that the romance was more on the back burner, but it was there. I liked the angst and the feeling of the slow burn, but I love that it wasn't the entire premise of this book. All right, the next book was The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4-star. I didn't think it was the best romance book that I've ever read, but I really enjoyed it. This is about a girl named Natasha who is about to get deported back to Jamaica with her family, and she's trying to stop that from happening, and during that process, she runs into a boy in the middle of Times Square, and it's about their whirlwind romance in the span of a day. I really enjoyed it. I think that it was very good, but I do have reasons to why this is not a 5-star for me. So one of the things I did love about this book was I love that it had different diverse characters, a Black character as well as a Asian American character. I really, really enjoyed that. However, even though I know the whole premise of this book was the fact that it was supposed to be set in a day and it was supposed to be a whirlwind romance, I just felt like it wasn't enough romance for me. Enough romance for it to be over the moon, like extremely in my heart believable. And I just wish that I had a little bit more time with the characters to get that feeling of romance. Even though I know the premise is supposed to be in a day, it just didn't feel like enough for me. And without spoiling this book, I really, really enjoyed the ending. I think that the author did a great job with the ending of this book, and I think that's what kind of saved it for me, was the ending. And so I really did enjoy this book. Okay, so the next book that I read was Truth and Lies by Caroline Mitchell, and I gave this book a 3-star. When I had originally was writing down my notes and I realized that on Goodreads I gave this a 4-star. This book was not a 4-star book. It just wasn't. I don't know why I gave it that review. I definitely bumped it down to a 3. I think during this time of rating, I was just like being way too nice. I'm like, oh, all these books deserve 4-star reviews. No, this was not a 4-star, okay? It was a 3-star. It was a good book, but it was not overall by any means fantastic. This is about a woman who's a detective, and she gets a note from this serial killer. So it was a couple serial killer. The husband and the wife were a part of this mass killing spree, and she gets a note from the woman in jail saying that she is her daughter, and she is going to tell her the last, like the 3 remaining bodies that were never found from the time that they were killing. She would tell them if she agreed to meet with her and learn more about her past. And it was an interesting thriller mystery. I did enjoy that. It wasn't the kind of book that kept me on my toes, wanting more the entire time, but it was good. However, the ending of this book made me upset. Like, upset. I was mad. I just did not like the way that the author tied this book up. I just felt like it was totally unrealistic, and I just didn't like it. However, the one thing that I did really enjoy about this book, and I think that the author did so extremely well, is that the mother and daughter relationship never changed. The daughter, well, the main person in the story, the main character, hated her biological mother from start to finish. And I like the fact that this serial killer wasn't glamorized, wasn't made to feel bad for her. You know, she was just hated in the entire time. And I really enjoyed that, because sometimes I find that, especially with books like this, you're made to like feel sympathy for these people, and I like that wasn't expressed in this book. However, I didn't really care about the twists in this book. It wasn't my cup of tea. I wouldn't necessarily read it again, but it wasn't horrible enough for me to give it a 2-star or 1-star. I think it was just neutral, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Okay, so the next book that I read was When I Was You by Minka Kent. I gave this book a 3-star, and I honestly didn't write very many notes on this book because I couldn't remember anything good about it, but I couldn't remember anything bad about it. So that's why I gave it a 3-star. This book is about a girl who, I keep saying girl, a woman, a woman who was assaulted, going home after work one night. And so basically she was very withdrawn after that. She kind of stopped hanging out with friends and doing all those crazy things because she had a lot of PTSD associated with that. And then one day she notices this girl that looks exactly like her and wears exactly the clothes that she wears and exactly the car that she drives, and has a hairstyle exactly like her and perfume exactly like her, and she's trying to figure out why the heck this person looks exactly like her, is friends with some of her Facebook family, like is friends with some of her family on Facebook is what I meant to say, and she just can't quite figure it out. And so that's what this book premise is about. But yeah, I don't have any strong feelings against this book. I don't hate it, but I didn't love it, and it just is what it is. I'm gonna breeze on past it. The next book that I read was Cinder by Marissa Meyer, and I gave this book a 4-star. I did really enjoy this book, and I'm very excited to continue on with the series. But yeah, this is a Cinderella retelling, a sci-fi Cinderella retelling. I'm not going to really explain the premise because I get mixed up every time I try to explain this, but it's a Cinderella retelling and it's sci-fi. That's all you really need to know. But my thoughts on this book. I have never read sci-fi before, so this is my first delve into sci-fi, and I felt like it was a great start to reading sci-fi. It's very like nice and easy to read. It's very understandable, and I really enjoyed that about this book. I really enjoyed Cinder's relationship with her stepsister. I think in a lot of Cinderella retellings, both stepsisters are supposed to be really horrible, and I like the fact that she had a good relationship with one of them, and I really enjoyed that throughout the book. I felt like it added more depth to the Cinderella story. However, the very first hint of the twist that was coming in this book made it very obvious what was going to happen at the end, and I predicted it from like the first like third of the book, and I was like, okay, so now I'm just waiting for it to lead up to that. However, the ending was not what I expected. The ending was not closed enough for me, and this book reminds me of the other books that I was talking about that I read from January, which were the the Secret Keeper series, where each book follows a different character, and that's what this series does. But I just felt like this book wasn't close enough for me to say, okay, I'm ready to follow somebody else's perspective, because I don't know what happened in the end. Like, I'm still confused, and I still want more, and so I wish that it was a little bit more closed up. But then again, I haven't continued the series, so I don't know any more information. That's just kind of like my first initial thoughts with this book. All right, so the next book that I read was Somebody's Daughter. This is a 3-star book. I originally gave it a 4. Again, I don't know why. It was definitely a 3-star book. So this follows a family, a mom and dad and 2 twin sisters that basically they live in this hotel and they have a very awesome relationship. And then one day, one of the daughters does something that now puts her in a stage to get bullied. She's basically has some information out online that went viral, and now the family is trying to figure out how to navigate that world and deal with their own issues inside their family, as well as things that are going on outside of their family that this video that went viral is now causing consequences of. But it also causes the main character, the person that you're reading the story through, which is the mom, to have connections to her own past from her daughter's choices. So I thought that it was a very good book premise. I really enjoyed it. However, I hated the dad in this book. All the way up until like probably the last chapter, I hated him. And I appreciate what the author did. The author, I don't want to, because the synopsis doesn't really tell you what happens, so I don't want to spoil it, but the author put the dad in this position so that he could play the negative aspects of what people see from this particular choice that this daughter made. I do appreciate that the author did that, but I just felt like the author pushed it too hard, and it was totally unbelievable that this dad at the beginning of the book that loved his daughter with all his being was acting like this, and I just did not like that. I did not like that at all. I really like the fact that this book talks about double standards and how people perceive other individuals that happen to be in this scenario. I really like that it talks about that. I like that it talks about cybersecurity. I like that it talked about some really good, hard-hitting topics. I just felt like it kind of missed the mark for me a little bit. The next book that I read was The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary, and I loved this book. This was a 5-star book for me. I enjoyed it so freaking much. I loved it to death. So this is about a man and a woman that are sharing a apartment, and they're also sharing a bed. So the man works nights and the woman works days, so they never see each other. But in the midst of never seeing each other, they start to communicate with each other via post-it notes and like just different notes around the house, and with that sparks a relationship, and it was so freaking good. I loved it so much. I really think the author did a great job. I loved the premise of this book. I think it was executed beautifully, and I loved it so much. 5-star for sure. But my notes on this book was I really thought the premise of this book was so cute, and like I said, the execution was wonderful. But I also loved how this book talked about hard-hitting topics like physical and emotional, not physical, but emotional and mental abuse, and how that doesn't define you as a person, but you can go past that and move past a relationship like that. I really enjoyed that. I loved how this relationship developed. It was a fast-paced book, and it didn't seem like that much time had passed, but in reality of the book, it was about a span of a year and a half, and I felt like that definitely gave the characters enough time to create a relationship in the circumstances that they were in, with the fact that they never saw each other, and so I really, really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the structure of this book. I liked the dual perspectives. I think that it was written beautifully, and I definitely want a hard copy for myself because it was just so freaking good. Okay, so the next book was another ebook, and I read Tempting the Best Man. This book was by J. Lynn. I gave this a 3-star, and that is generous. It wasn't a horrible book, but it wasn't fantastic either. I don't really have a lot of bad things or good things to say about this book, honestly, but it was an adult romance book, hate to love romance. It's revolving around a wedding. She's the maid of honor, and the guy that she hates, but really she loves, she's like been in love with him forever, is the best man, and he seemingly hates her as well. And so, you know, hate to love, they end up, you know, having this relationship and trying to deal with the fact that their past didn't seem to add up. And I just didn't like love this book. It was good, but it wasn't fantastic. This is just a warning if anybody wants to read this that are a younger audience. This is definitely an adult romance. There are very steamy sexual scenes in this book, so just be forewarned for that. But overall, the book was okay. Alright, so the next book is 50 Shades of Grey. I gave this a 2-star. I'm not going to talk too much about this because I have a whole video coming, but yes, 2-star, 50 Shades of Grey. Okay, so the next book is another 5-star, and that was Red, White, and Royal Blue. It's such a tongue twister. But that's by Casey McQuiston, and it was a 5-star book without a doubt. It was hilarious. It was so funny. I loved it to every particle of my body and soul. Loved that book. It had me laughing, it had me crying, it had me thinking. It was incredible. So this book is about the son of the president and the son of the royal family. And essentially in the beginning of the book, they don't like each other, and they end up making this big scene at one of the royal weddings where they now have to pull a publicity stunt to make it seem like they are best friends. And after that publicity event, they start communicating and really developing a relationship. And it was great. It deals with a lot of politics in regards to gay people in politics, and I think that it was done so beautifully. I love the representation. Obviously, it is a queer book, and I think that it was done incredibly well. Not only was the fact that it was a male-male relationship, but it also had diversity in regards to the characters. So the main character, Alex, was Mexican. His family was Mexican. The president was Mexican, and I really enjoyed that was put into the book as well. It wasn't like the big premise of the book, but it was in there, and I liked that. I will also give another warning that I don't know if this is technically marketed as an adult book, but there are a lot of steamy scenes in here, so just beware of that. I thought that the politics in this book were discussed very well. I think the balance between the politics, the relationships, and the storyline were balanced really well throughout the book, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. Along with the characters in this book that I love with all my heart, I also really enjoyed the side characters. I think that the author did a great job at adding them in where they were necessary and really creating a love for those characters, so I really enjoyed that. And like I said in the beginning, this book made me laugh, made me cry, and made me think. It was just a downright incredible freaking book. Alright, the next book is Anna and the French Kiss. I gave this a 3-star. It was a good YA contemporary book. I mean, it wasn't anything fantastic. I can definitely see why I liked it in high school. It was good. It was okay. This is about a girl named Anna who her parents sent her off to a boarding school in Paris, and she didn't really want to go. She wanted to continue her life in Atlanta, but she ends up meeting this guy named Etienne Sinclair, and Etienne, right? Etienne Sinclair? I think that's his name. But they end up having a relationship, obviously, and not too much to say about this. It was good, but it wasn't great. But I am intrigued to read the other parts of the series. They're not necessarily a series, they're more standalones on their own, but they're still all a part of this world, and so I do want to read those too. Okay, so the next book is Twilight. I gave this book a 4-star. I'm not going to explain the premise of this book, you guys already know, but I gave it a 4-star, but I think that the reason for my rating has a lot more to do with nostalgia than it has to do with this book. Reading this book, like, transported me back to another time. I can remember sitting in the car reading this and the smells and just kidding, not that intense, but it was very, very good, and I did enjoy the nostalgic feeling that brought back all these emotions for me. However, there are some things that I noticed in this book that I just did not like. The insta-love in this book is ridiculous. Like, she probably had a full-on, like, actual conversation with Edward in this book for maybe an hour. Like, an actual conversation. Not about school, not, like, conversation. And she was like, I love him. And I'm like, what do you mean? You barely know him, but okay. Other than that, I still enjoyed the book. I think that it holds up. I am very excited to continue. I'm very excited to continue to read the series. It just holds a lot of nostalgic value, and I did enjoy it, but it was not a 5-star read. That's it. Okay, so the next book is Fallen. This is a 3-star read for me. This book is kind of hard to explain, but it's basically about a girl who, after something happens in her personal life, a traumatic event happens in her personal life, she gets sent to this reform school where she meets these 2 boys that she's kind of bouncing between, and she has a strong pull and allure to a guy named Daniel, and she's getting, like, flashbacks from what seem like dreams and she thinks are memories in her life that she doesn't remember. And so she's trying to put the puzzle pieces together and figure out where she fits in all of this. I read this book in high school, and this book definitely was not as good as I thought it was when I was in high school. I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't horrible. It didn't really have a lot going for it. The book was kind of boring, and like three quarters into this book, I'm like, nothing has happened. Like, literally, nothing exciting has happened. And the last quarter of this book is where, like, the real action happens. But this is a sequel, and I know, from what I can remember, the books get more exciting as they go on. But this book, I was kind of bored. Like, I listened to it, so it was an easy read for me. But, yeah. Like I said, it was an easy read. I will continue with the series, but it just wasn't as good as I remember it being. The next book that I read was The Unfunny Mooners by Christina Lauren, and I read that via audiobook through my library, and it was very good. It was a 4-star read. I really enjoyed it. I'm a big fan of the hate to love romance. I think that it's super cute. So this is basically about a girl who's twin sisters with the bride, and she, for all intents and purposes, believes that her life's unlucky, and then one day, on the wedding, everybody gets sick except for her and the best man, which she does not like. She hates him severely. But after everything, her sister told her that she and him needed to take the trip because it was non-refundable, and so they go on this honeymoon together, and they basically fall in love. I did like this book. It wasn't a 5-star read for me just because I feel like the thing that I love the most about the hate to love romance is that there's a lot of, like, bickering and, you know, jabbing and things like that, and I just didn't feel like there was enough of that in this book. I liked the fact that, you know, they fell in love, and I think that was wonderful, but I just needed more of that hate in the actual relationship that I just didn't get enough of. But overall, I thought it was a good book. I found myself laughing out loud at some parts, smiling and feeling for the characters, and I really enjoyed that. I liked the familial ties that they had in this book that were very prevalent. were very prevalent in this book, and I really enjoyed how they wrote that into the story. I think that it was fantastic. But other than that, I don't really have much to say. It was a good book. Moving on. The next book that I read and DNF'd was Dear Haiti, Love Elaine. I really wanted to like this book. It wasn't for me. It was so boring, and it was a 1-star. Sorry, I'm so sorry. But it just was not my type of book. And so basically this is about a young girl who's in high school, and during one of her class presentations, she plays a prank and she gets suspended, and during her suspension, she gets sent to Haiti to basically take a class there. So they were being nice, and they gave her suspension to Haiti, where she goes to visit her mom, who's staying there with her aunt. And in the book, she was supposed to learn more about her heritage and her mother, and I didn't get that far. I was 200 pages in, and I was bored. I was just so bored. I didn't get past anything that the synopsis didn't give me, and it was just boring. So I put that down, and I was like, no more. Thank you. Library, you can have this back. Thanks for the time. But yeah, so we're going to move on to the next book. The next book I read was 50 Shades Darker. I gave this a 3-star. It was definitely better than the first book, but it's still not great. I'm just gonna say that. Still not great. But again, I'm not gonna talk about this. It was a 3-star, better than the first. Okay, we're getting to the end, guys, I promise. The next book that I read was Bloom, and this is by Kevin Panetta and Savannah. Oh, I'm not saying that last name. This is a graphic novel. It is a male-male relationship graphic novel. It's very soft romance. This is the first graphic novel I've ever read, and I did enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars. No, I gave it 3 stars. I gave it 3 stars, and I did enjoy it. It just, it wasn't my favorite. It just wasn't my favorite thing. I liked the romance. Technically, I did. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this, really. This is basically about a boy who wants to be in a band with his friends, and he wants to move to the big city and make it big with his band, but his dad doesn't want him to go because he needs help in the bakery that they own, and so he decides that if he's going to leave, he needs to find his replacement, and he ends up meeting this boy that he is training to replace him, and in that time, they create a relationship and fall in love. And I think the premise of this book was really good. Granted, this is my very first graphic novel, so I didn't really know what to expect, but I thought that it was cute. I did notice that this book did not breach the topic of sexuality at all. It was just kind of like they were gay and they didn't talk about it, and I did like that. I like that sometimes it's just doesn't need to be discussed. It just is, and I really enjoy that. However, it did seem that the relationship was kind of rushed. I know this is a graphic novel, and the inner workings of graphic novels, for me at least from what I've read, works a little bit differently. But I just felt like it was rushed, even though in this book it explains, like, it shows that it goes over like months and months, but it just felt like one day they were friends and the next day they were kissing with no type of like segue into that. They were just a relationship, and I don't know. I didn't feel the connection that I wanted to with the characters. I felt that the main character, Ari, was a little bit annoying at times and very selfish in his mindset, but that was pretty much the only thing I didn't like about the characters. Other than that, I felt like it was a cute graphic novel. Sorry, I just got a random scam call, but I would recommend it for the people that are interested in books like this. Okay, the next book that I read was Slam Volume 1, and I gave this a 2-star. I did not like this book. This book is about roller derby, friends basically, and they both get drafted onto different teams, and it's just like how that puts strain on their relationship, and I just did not jive with this book whatsoever at all. I felt like it was just so stupid and silly, and I felt like the premise of this book and the reason that they were fighting was just so petty and so childish, and it was not for me. I felt very confused throughout this book. It jumped around so much. There was so much confusion for me, and I could not keep up, and I didn't care about the characters. I had no investment in their relationship, and I did not like it. Sorry. The next book that I read was Nevermore by Jessica Townsend. This is a middle grade book about a girl named Morgan Crow who is a cursed child, and she is destined to die on her 11th birthday. But on her 11th birthday, she gets a bid on bid day to get taken to this school and this world called Nevermore by a character called Juniper North, and she is competing in the trials to become a part of this elite society called the Wonder something. I don't have the book on me, and I forgot. I'm sorry. I don't want to call it the Wondersmith because I know it's not that. It's the Wondrous Society, and she's trying to get into that. And I thought it was a very cute book. I loved it. I cannot wait to get the physical copy. I want to read the second book. I think that Jessica Townsend did a great job on this book. It felt like the book just kind of sucked you right in, and you were a part of the world, and you were immersed in the magic system and the people. I loved the main character. I loved the side characters. I laughed in this book. I thought it was great. It kind of touches with some topics about like accepting who you are, and I really liked it. I think it was a great book, and I would definitely reread it, and I would definitely continue on with the series. And so we're coming to the end. We only have a couple more. The next book I read was Mooncakes, and this is a female romance, basically. and one of the characters is a witch and the other one is a werewolf, and they were friends from a long time ago, and they meet up in the woods, and they're trying to destroy this demon that she finds in the woods, and with her two grandmas that are also witches, and I thought this was a really cute book. It is obviously female, which I love the representation for that. Also, the main character is deaf, which I really enjoy. It's not talked about in the book, it's not explained, she just is, and I love books like that we don't have to explain why they are the way that they are, they just are. And I love that it had disability representation in here. Also, the other main character, I don't remember their names, sorry. This is Nova, and this is, I don't remember. She is also non-binary, and I like that as well. I like that they talked about pronouns in this book, and it's a short graphic novel. It's not very big, and they touched on some really cool topics in here. And so I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was cute, I thought it was silly, I thought it was fun, and I would definitely reread it. The next book I read was We're Gonna Need More Wine by Gabrielle Union. It was a nonfiction autobiography, memoir, whatever you want to call it. This book was fantastic. I gave it a 5-star. It was absolutely phenomenal. There are some trigger warnings in this book, so I'm just going to give them to you now. This has trigger warnings for rape. I'm trying to think if there's any more like specific trigger warnings. She talks about death in this book. She talks about drugs in this book. Yes, I think that's the only trigger warnings that I need to talk about, but this book was so incredible. It talks a lot about what it's like to be a woman living as a Black woman in America, and I loved it so much. She talks about a ton of different things in this book. This is basically about her life, but she talks on a bunch of incredible topics, and I never felt more seen in a book than I did reading this book, and I felt it in my soul. It heard me, it saw me. I love this book. I cannot wait to get a physical copy of this book so that I can read it and annotate it and write notes in it and just pull out the parts that really just stuck to me so much. And she talks about raising Black kids in America in a predominantly white town. She talks about growing up not feeling like she was Black enough, or not feeling like she was white enough, or trying to conform to life as a Black woman, but in a white society. It was so good. It was so freaking good, and I would compel everyone to read it. It was so good. It just opens your mind up to topics. I love that she played devil's advocate in this book. She talks about committing the same things that she hates about society, but she knows that they're wrong. The way she's talking about them, she's making a joke about them, but you know that the underlying topic of it all is that she's pointing out what's wrong with this world and how she views it. And oh man, it was so good. It was so good. Please read it. Please read it. I almost died. And then the next book that I finished was Hunger. This is actually the last book that I finished, but I'm going to talk about one more. Was Hunger, and this was by Roxane Gray, and this is a book about her life. This is another one that has a lot of trigger warnings. So trigger warnings for rape, depression, bulimia, self-harm. So I just want to give you guys a forewarning on that. But this book was incredible. This was a 4-star read for me. The reason that it wasn't a 5-star is just I didn't connect to it on the same level that I did with Gabrielle Union's book, and so therefore my enjoyment was a little bit lesser. But I still think it's an incredible book. It's like a high 4-star, like a 4.75. Like, it's really good. She talks about basically her life of being fat, and she just talks about the reason why she got fat, and how she used it as a mechanism for safety in her own right, but also how people view her and how the world sees fat people, and how fat people are treated in a society, and how she dealt with things that went on in her life that were horrible and tragic, and how she is trying to accept who she is as a person. And I just thought it was an incredible book. It drew so much light on a lot of different topics, and I really think that that's another one that a lot of people should read. And the last book that I'm going to talk about is Anna Kay. I am currently still reading this book. However, I am like 2 days away from the end of February, so I thought I would include it. This is on track to be like a 3.75, maybe a 4-star read if the ending just smashes it out of the park. But it's a good book. It's a Anna Karenina retelling, and it's good. At first I was very it was very hard for me to get into it because it follows so many different perspectives and has no chapters, so it's just like it's just so long and it just feels like you're reading and reading and reading forever. But I thought that it was a good book all in all so far, at least. After the first like 50 pages it starts to pick up and I feel like I connect to the story more. But yeah, I'm not going to talk too much about this because I haven't actually finished it, but I'm hoping to finish it by the end of February. If not, this will also be my March wrap up, so you're welcome for that. And we've made it to the end. Thank you guys if you sat through this whole thing. I really appreciate it. You are a trooper and I love you. But I really enjoyed this entire 2 months of reading. Like, it was phenomenal. I read some great books. I read some not so great books. But all in all, it was an incredible experience. I cannot wait for March and all the reading that I'm going to get done in March. And I'm just so freaking excited. But if you guys did enjoy this book, if you guys did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up. It would support me so much if you guys gave it a thumbs up and subscribed and left any comments, suggestions, questions to better my videos, or any suggestions that you guys want for any book related videos, lifestyle videos, anything like that. That would be awesome. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. And I'm so excited to see you guys in the next one. Bye.